Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As Laura had said, my name is Mitchell Daibo, and I'm from Casablanca Lake First Nation, a remote fly-in community that's close to Kitchener-Meg-Sip, Big Trout Lake, KI, as you probably know it. We're in between Webequie, the Ring of Fire, and KI. We're approximately 1,100 in population on an island. Total membership is probably about 1,500, so a lot of the membership lives there in the community, and we depend on diesel-generated electrical systems for our. I'll talk about the life we lead over there briefly as a lead-in to some of the more technical aspects of one specific project we're doing as a research and development initiative with. The lead is University of Waterloo, and there's a couple of PhD candidates here that'll speak to that. I'm here just to present the community situation with respect to our reliance on diesel electrification and pretty much any energy source, to tell you the truth. It's permeated all fabrics of way of life in our community, right down to the expression of our cultural rights and interests. How we rely on petroleum-based products. So as I said, I'm the general manager of the Development Corporation. We centralize all of the economic development and business development initiatives in the community for the First Nation. And that's the way it's been when I took over some years ago. And I'm trying to incubate some entrepreneurs in retail and other areas as well. We have pretty much a captive market on the island, so we can launch a number of initiatives. But what I'm going to talk about is that the foundation, anything we're doing, requires energy. And in this specific instance, diesel-fired electrification. Without it, we can do nothing. That's where I'm at. We have a high incidence of youth in the community, and youth as defined by government would be up to 29 years of age. It's a huge cohort. They're looking for opportunities. They're tech savvy. There's a lot of permeation with iPods and iPads and cell phones. And I know because one of my businesses is the internet business with broadband. And we sell a lot of those gadgets in the community. So you won't see a left or right hand on anyone without a gadget in it in the community. And we need electricity to power our systems. So there's a high take-up of technology in youth, and they're looking for opportunities in the community once they graduate high school, jobs, job creation, training, employment, and that's my bailiwick in the community. So because unemployment is so high in a community of 1,100, we're probably the major employer is the First Nation. Through the transfer payments they get from both levels of government to the tune of about $15 million a year. All of the program services that those funds come for create the jobs, and mostly education, welfare, program delivery like that. As far as economic development, we're trying to create as much as we can in terms of opportunity outside of government transfer payments from a base of $84,000 a year of that $15 million. So it's a lot of hustling as far as proposal writing, looking for proponents, partners, experts. We're out there all the time looking for ways and means to capitalize on some of the opportunities I see in the community and what I see coming in the future. Okay, so in terms of our electrification system, we have a diesel plant with the 3 generators, sizes listed there. It's managed by Hydro One Remote Communities, Inc., so we're not an independent power authority. We're not in this business. They are. However, we have business relationships with them for procurement of fuel, storage tanks, etc. Now, we haven't had an upgrade to this diesel system. It's rated as a 1 megawatt plant. And Hydro One Remotes has a policy when you hit 75% of the peak load or the prime rating of the plant, they cut you off from any growth. You can't build any new buildings. You can't attach anything new to that distribution system because there is no more power. There's a high risk of failure, catastrophic failure, fire, brownouts, blackouts, what have you. We've exceeded 90% of that capacity already. And just this weekend, we had a blackout for a while. Now, Hydro One Remotes is based here in Thunder Bay, so they fly all their crews in with charters, whether it's mechanics, electricians, whatever specialists they need. They fly them in, so if we suffer a blackout, it's there for at least 5 to 6 hours. And that's a concern for us because with the prevalence of diabetes, we have people that are on dialysis in the community. We have people that are fighting cancer, and it creates a bit of an emergency to deal with those individuals and probably evacuate them. So we really can't take this very lightly. And so I think this coming winter is going to be quite a challenge. We finally got an approval to expand our diesel system to 1.5 megawatts, but it takes time to procure a 1.5 megawatt diesel genset from Toromont Caterpillar and all the associated equipment, and go to tender and get contractors that specialize in this type of construction. So probably in 2015 we'll see some construction, maybe commissioning by 2016 late for Lucky. So that's probably the earliest we'll see extra power. I talked a bit about our reliance on energy, especially diesel, petroleum products. It heats our buildings, whether it's our houses, because now with the CMHC standards for R2000, we've got fuel-fired furnaces in the houses, so the homeowners have to buy fuel from us, another one of our businesses. The First Nation itself, for all of the banned buildings, the heavy equipment. And when I talked about going down right into culture, like I find that a bit sad that to express your cultural rights and interests on the land, you're dependent on diesel, your outboard motors, your skidoos, your chainsaws, whatever you have, you're buying gas or oil, and you're buying it from yourselves, your own community-owned business. But nonetheless, you're reliant on those today, and I don't think there's any turning back from what I see. And it's only growing as the population grows, and we have a high growth rate in our community. So that's transferring to the youth, and now with the youth taking up the technology that they're doing, the demand is increasing for power, for petroleum products. A lot of personal vehicles I see coming on the winter road. The main challenges I see the problems I face daily with the energy dependence is, A, we're at the mercy of market conditions. I have no control over price. I pay whatever it costs to get it in there, from the product itself to the transportation. And if the winter road isn't successful, I'm flying fuel in constantly for a year. And we've done that a couple of times, 3 successive years. Winter road failed. We've been flying fuel for 3 years constantly. It's expensive. Right now, we got a successful winter road last time, January to March, and our price is $2.95 a liter via winter road. If it flies this year, it's going to go up. So with a high incidence of welfare, I don't know how people can afford to live up there. And you operate their chainsaws to cut wood, power their outboard motors to go out on the land, skidoos. So I think what I'm leading to is solutions. Can you flip the next one? Part of my, what I do, I'm more of a bird dog. Though I'm the general manager, I'm looking for solutions, I'm looking for options, I'm looking for ways forward into the future. The staff I have run the things that have been created. They maintain the businesses that we've set up. And I look for new businesses, I look for new opportunities, I look for new answers to our current problems. And I'm going to talk about some of the things we've been doing since 1997 to deal with this situation. And it's not going away, that's for certain. And the community's not going away either. They're not going to leave their homelands. So this situation, as far as I'm concerned, is here to stay. It doesn't matter if there's a transmission line or not. It's not going away. So some of the initiatives quickly I'll talk about, because I want to turn it over to these guys to talk about the heart of this research and development project we're involved with. It started back in '97. That was when Ontario Hydro was in Ontario dealing with all of the electrification issues before the government broke them up. They set up 3 Bergie wind turbines in the community. It was a demonstration. They put them there. They had no capacity in Ontario Hydro. They really didn't have a commitment. They thought it would be nice to get into looking at renewable energy, and it was kind of haphazard, so the thing stood there for quite a long time since then, doing nothing. The blades spun and didn't generate any electricity, and the technology at the time, the gearboxes, has kind of evolved since, and they didn't fix them. So they sat there and we watched them for years and years and years. We started looking around to find some expertise. Pembina Institute and our tribal council, which Laura represents, Chibougamau Tech Services, we looked at a community energy plan. What are we doing here? What is it required? What does it mean to the community? How much do we need to educate the membership? And looking at all the things I've talked about inside of a plan that we could present to the community. But that didn't fix anything. It just made us more aware of, our dire straits with reliance on diesel. Hydro One came in with a customer demand management, they call it, on the demand side to try to reduce consumption. Wrap blankets around the hot water tanks, give us energy efficient light bulbs, timers, things like that. But they were weak on the education awareness at the residential level. There was not very good take-up from the homeowners, because I don't think the understanding was there that they would save on their electrical bills if they adopted this technology. But it took work. It took a fair bit of work, house to house. And they funded an energy advisor for a year and walked away and said, okay, we're on to the next community. So that died. I think, in fact, some of the blankets on the hot water tanks burnt. But in any case, that was a flash in the pan. We've done water power site investigations to see if we can do any small run-of-the-river systems with some private developers, and we had one promising site, but transmission killed it. It was too far away from the community because it was only for our loads. It's non-commercial off-grid. And then finally, with Hydro One remotes, and I think at a conference in the early 2000s, talking to some of the people from Waterloo, we started incubating this research and development project to look at integrating renewable energy into a diesel-driven electrical system, a distribution system, because how do you control the different sources of energy feeding into a distribution system when it's not compatible to the loads and the different sources are not dispatchable at the same time? You can't tell wind when to blow. You can't tell the sun when to shine at different times of the year. And Mariano will talk about that in his graphs. For our community, how we look at that resource versus diesel-driven generators that Hydro One remotes and dispatches according to the load. So the technology is not there to integrate the renewable energy sources into a diesel system efficiently. And that's the basis of this project. We're sort of, I guess, the guinea pig community for all remote communities in Canada, of which I believe there's about 300. 300. Other things we've done, we've, with Laura, installed solar panels on the water treatment plant. One of the buildings that has the highest loads in terms of energy demand, electricity demand, and also for our budgets at the BAN office, uses the most money in terms of O&M budgets to pay hydro for the hydro bills. So if we put on the solar panels and run a net metering scenario where the meter spins backwards, we should see some savings on our hydro bill and save some money immediately in our budgets. And that's fairly new, and I think there's some technical glitches, as there is with any new technology adoption in our communities. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the technicians, we don't want to rely on more imports, especially of people. We want to build our capacity, so it's new yet. We're into a second generation now of a community energy plan with Ontario Power Authority funding through Chibougamau again, the 5 communities of our tribal council. So we've just launched version 2 of our community energy plan. So a lot of this, again, will get looked at in there. My specific focus in what I do with the Development Corp has been, because we're on load restrictions and we can't build anything unless something burns or gets disconnected, I have no power to do anything. But I want to build a small business center. I want to build a restaurant. I have a lot of ideas. I'm looking at the facilities we have now and trying to maximize the utility out of those facilities. So, for example, a community center sits dormant all the time unless there's a gospel jamboree, a band meeting, or a 2-day training session. Other than that, it's closed, but there's power feeding into that thing. I could use it. So we've rebranded our community center into a small business center until we get more power in a few years. And I'm building a restaurant. I've attached a 10-bed motel. I've got administration complex in there for the development corp to house our Petrocast business, our internet business, our administrative people, and trying to maximize the use of that facility. So that's the track I'm on, is looking at the facilities we do have and how can I rebrand them to maximize utility until we get more power. I will eventually run out of facilities, but hopefully I'll have enough to last till 2016, 17 when this thing gets commissioned. As far as the future, I've been toying with some ideas with Waterloo to help us look at initial analysis on some things. Like when you look at a diesel plant and they're inefficient as far as producing electricity, that's not the most efficient way to produce electricity. To burn a liter of diesel fuel, you're probably wasting at least 40% of that liter of diesel on heat. Heat goes out into the atmosphere. That's a waste of energy. Can we recapture that heat with a turbine system to create more electricity, not requiring a $12 million upgrade? I don't know, but it's a question I want to follow and look at. Can we build a small solar farm and feed into the diesel system? Again, it depends on the controller that doesn't exist. We were part of the Wataynikaneyap Power group of First Nations looking at building that new transmission line from Dryden to Pickle Lake as a commercial venture, and phase 2 then running that power north with transmission lines to our communities. I think we've been at phase 1, which is the Pickle Lake line, which is inside of the energy plan of the Ontario government as a priority. And we're probably 5-6 years in, and we're nowhere near close to getting licensed or approved. So I see the transmission line going north 20 years away at least. People say 6, 7. I don't even know if I'll be alive when it gets there, but I'm not going to wait. I'm certainly not going to sit on my butt and wait. I'll do whatever I can. So maybe some more net metering on other facilities with large loads. We're looking for solutions, but there's constant imports we need and we don't have in the community, and that's a fact. I have to accept experts. I do not have any PhD candidates in my community. We have maybe bachelor's, maybe one master's degree. So I'm looking to academia, Waterloo, University of Toronto, the best, the brightest in those fields, electrical engineering, environment, geography, economic development, and industry. Wenbo or Hatch are part of this project, Hydro One remotes. And capacity in the community, whatever we adopt, I want to be sure that our people get some transference of skills and knowledge, so we're not flying in technicians like Hydro does. They manage it from over here. They send a charter in at great expense. The guys are there a couple hours, they're gone. They don't tell us nothing. We have no idea when we have a blackout how long we're going to endure that. We just run to the store and buy candles and flashlights and wait it out. And the other one I think we're weak on as communities, and we need to wake up, is regional collaboration. I know we have some corporations, and generally they're inside tribal council boundaries. I think we need to break out of that. If we're going to solve problems for ourselves, we need to come together and talk about this and do something about it and not wait for it to get done, because it's not going to get done. So I think I think we're a bit weak on regional collaboration. I'd like to see more of that. I think that's about it. Mariano's next, or Costas? So that's the Casablanca situation, and now we'll lead into the R&D program.
I just have a quick question. What was the duration of your longest blackout? How long have you been in the fire?
This past weekend, it was about 3 to 4 hours at 6 o'clock at night, and we were told to prepare to endure it till at least 10 or 11 before we were even told what the problem might be and how much longer it might be. So we're literally in the dark for at least 4 hours. And I mean, in this kind of weather, you wouldn't necessarily expect that. But come winter time, when it's minus 50 in our community and there's very little light, the day is quite short, it's going to be hard to endure that. So we need emergency plans, and we need to be sure we can get those people out that are at high risk in terms of their health ASAP. Costas.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kostas Karanazos. I'm here from the University of Waterloo. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting us here. So the project that we are working with Casabonica Lake First Nation and the partners presented before in the slide before is the Eco Energy Innovation Initiative program, which consists of a lot of research and development projects and also demonstration projects. The overall goal is to create high-quality jobs, the generation of new economic development opportunities, and also the protection of the environment. The specific project that we're working is to develop, test, and demonstrate a commercially viable utility-grade controller, which is something that Mariano will say a few words afterwards, which is a machine, computerized equipment and device that controls how much renewable energy will be injected in the local microgrid, and also to prepare feasibility and system planning studies in collaboration with Casabonica Lake First Nation that will address also technical, economic, and social aspects in the community. So the vision, the shared vision of all partners in this project is to create a way to get more renewable energy into the communities, the promotion of renewable energy as a low energy source, the promotion of communities that they use less diesel fuel, and also to create a market for projects and products and services for renewable energy. So the main challenges, the general idea about the challenges with renewable energy is that it's affected by a number of choices, a number of factors, which in general there are 5. So we have technology choices, which are also going back to the availability of resources in the communities, either wind, solar, geothermal, or biomass, or hydropower plants, depend on how much availability of these resources is in every community. Then we have the ecological systems, local values, traditional knowledge, and also regulations affect choices for renewable energy. Then the strategies of the local communities, the First Nation governments also affect these decisions. How do they envision the future, how they will generate revenue, also affects decisions. The IPA, the Independent Power Authorities, and hydro and remote communities also views and visions affect these decisions. Another important part is the business strategies of all these industries that they are working on the renewable energy sector. For example, the consolidation of the solar panels industry leads to lower prices for modules, which makes solar energy more accessible and more affordable currently. And finally, user practices like conservation habits or building regulations affect the how users go on with energy. Their behavior affects the performance of buildings, and also this influences the uptake of renewable energy. At the local level, the most important factor is the cost of energy generated. How much does it cost this renewable energy? Because we have to compare it with the diesel-generated electricity. And then jobs, environmental impact, and energy security are important factors. And finally, the connection or not to the provincial grid is a crucial factor, because the communities that they are able or will be, that they are connected or will be connected to the grid will be able to supply the excess energy to the grid, while the communities that are not and will not be, because there will be probably 4 of them, at least in Northern Ontario, that will not be connected, they have to address this theme with demand-side management and control, the controller that I mentioned before. So the next slide. One way of doing this, to find out how the community will go in the future, is to create a community energy plan. And these community energy plans document local priorities for how energy should be generated, delivered, and used in the community. And it's usually done in 4 steps. First, you identify, the community members gather together and identify their vision about the future, how the energy system will be in the future, based on local needs, values, and resources. Then a number of baseline studies will be created, an energy mapping. And then they will create a number of scenarios based on these baseline studies on how they want the energy system to be, taking into consideration the costs, benefits, constraints, local resources. And through this iterative process, the community will end up with a plan that best uses the local resources, and it's closer to the initial vision that they had. And there are some general benefits out of this process, which will be, again, self-sufficiency, lower carbon intensity, economic development opportunities, participation of the community members, and opportunities, as Mitch has said, also of knowledge transfer and training of the community people. Now, in the next slides, Mariano will present about the community data that is necessary for the assessment of renewable energy projects.
Hi, so thanks again for having us here. And my name is Mariano Arriaga, I'm also from the University of Waterloo. This part, the last part of the presentation, is mainly continuing with putting everything, the context that we had, basically Mitch having all the community issues and what will take to actually get any kind of project. Obviously, this is not only renewable energy, it could be anything. But for any kind of project, you need a lot of data. You need to have the most reliable data you have, the most updated one, the current one. And usually this information, especially for remote communities, it's there. To certain levels, to certain levels of resolution, it's there, but it's sometimes not that easy to get, right? And a lot of parties between utilities, communities, academia, can also work, industry, to try to get a database of what equipment do you have, which kind of social, what's the priorities of the community, what are the renewable resources? Like if the community has no wind, there's no point in looking at wind options, right? And also, as we were talking with the red screen, it also depends on which kind of project are you going to do. Are you going to do a self-consumption project? Are you going to sell to the grid? The prices are very different. So it really affects a lot of what you can actually do, depending on which kind of information you have and which kind of economics you have. To the next slide. So I'm not going to go into all this detail, but on each of these categories, you need certain information, right? Like what's time from the simple one of like, okay, how many generators do you have? But we also need more specific information of, okay, when are your peaks? How can peaks of diesel can coincide with wind, right? Or solar in this case. What are your growth rates? It might be, as Mitch was saying, you could get to the point that now there's no growth. So you can, and I've seen that, I've taken a look at the curve and you see the historical growth and getting to a point that it's actually levelizing because there's no more capacity. And there's other technical details that I won't go through it, but there's certain information that can be obtained, right? And from the other side is also we have the economics, especially with, I'm talking only about places that right now they're not connected to the grid. So the cost, basically, we need to avoid the fuel cost of diesel, right? That's the main thing to avoid. But the rates are not that simple. And depending on if you're an independent community or one associated with hydro one, you will have different issues and you will have different rates. So the projects will actually have a direct impact on the size and on the capacity of the plant, right, that you are able to install. And evidently, we need information about renewable energy that sometimes, as I think Chris mentioned, like how difficult it is to know that information. Well, sometimes it's closer than other ones, right? Solar might be a little bit more predictable, but still not as good. But wind might be more difficult to predict, right? So it does depend. And evidently, all the social issues. So what we have done is, we did this for all Canada. And it's a work that we started with, well, actually, Natural Resource Canada started some kind of database. And we have upgraded from there to try to analyze all the, in this case, the 280 remote communities in Canada and see more or less what's the status of these ones, right? Which kind of generators they have, how big they are, what's their growth, what's their population, and all the parameters we need to get these kinds of projects. Evidently, we don't have the same amount of detail for all these communities. But right now, I'll focus in Ontario. So for example, the map of Ontario, this one has all the remote communities. And in this case, what we're measuring here is the solar irradiation, which is how much sun you get in a year. This is from satellites. Evidently, if you have something, equipment that can monitor exactly at the community, then we'll have a better correlation. And we are doing that right now at Casabonica. And for example, this is more or less all the information that you can get through the year. So evidently, we're very north. So if this is January, we're not getting a lot of sun here, while in July, August, obviously, it's higher, right? So just to give you an idea of the information we get, evidently, the peaks here are in winter. So solar may or may not. Also depends on the economics, right? But the solar is not going to avoid any kind of problems with peaks, because in the winter, you have no, like the amount of sun is less. The same thing we did, but for wind. Also, we got some data. This is actually, we have data for every hour. Evidently, it's a forecast, and it's an approximation, but it gives you a good idea of, for all these communities, more or less how good the wind is at certain height. I don't want to go into details, but obviously with wind, the higher you go, most of the time, you actually get better wind, right? So you're going to try to put the towers as high as you can, but also considering that in remote communities, it has to go through winter roads. So evidently, you cannot just say, okay, we're going to put a wind farm here. You cannot, right? And the other thing to consider, and it's those lines, the green, the layers, are permafrost zones. So that will affect, in the case of wind, the foundations that you will be putting. So whatever you put here, evidently, if the foundations to put something in, for example, Fort Severn, you will require to drill quite a bit. They're very, very different, and the cost evidently goes really high, right? So whatever, even Chris mentioned a price for solar of around 2,000 in these places, 2,700. In this case, for Casabonica, for example, was around 9,000. So it's a huge difference, right? So talking on grid and talking off grid is very different. We'll go to the next one. This one, I don't want to spend that much time here. If there's more questions about it, we can for sure talk more. But it's about, in general, what's the benefits of solar? What's the benefits of wind in this case, right? So in the case of solar, the good thing is that it's very modular. It's relatively easy to transport compared to wind. The operation and maintenance costs are less. It's the capacity building. It's probably easier than if you were to install wind turbines. So it's something that the community can get more involved into from the operation perspective and the maintenance perspective. But evidently, as I was saying, in the winter, there's not a lot of sun, right? So the peak won't be actually going different. The next one is the same thing, but for wind. So I was saying, these wind farms that you see down south, that's not going to get deployed into these locations. Like, the winter roads are not there. Basically, you need a good, good roads to get there, because the size of of the towers, especially in the nacelle, are high. And not only that, not only the turbine, but also the cranes. You need equipment that basically you don't have there. And I was trying to see if a 300 kilowatt turbine could be transported. Yeah, probably it could, but the cranes to get there cannot. And you're not going to rent a crane. If you miss the winter, you're not going to rent a crane for a year, because then the project is just going to be, cannot do it. So yeah, that's basically that part, right? And this is a little bit technical, but it's a point that Mitch wanted to highlight, and I agree with him. All the gray and black lines is basically your profile for what the community is spending at this point. If you see here, low, this is the night, and this is the day, right? So you can see that there's probably like 3 days around there. So at night you have low consumption, and then you have a higher consumption during the day. And in this case, the different gray lines and black lines represent what Mitch was saying about that in Casabonica, the way they operate, they have 3 generators. A small one, a medium one, and a high one. So when you're consuming low, like a little bit, you have the small one, right? And then you keep going like that. So when you see those changes, the plant itself is changing from one generator to the other one. At this point, most of the renewable energy that is installed in these locations has been to this level, where really you don't have an effect. So the diesel engines are awesome. I really like them. The diesel engines, they're very flexible. They can, with all the changes from low load to high load, they respond really good, right? It's technology that has been there for a long time. So when you have that renewable energy, really it doesn't affect that much the engines. But if for whatever reason you go to a higher installation capacity of renewable energy, you start having a lot of problems, because now the system won't be stable, right? You'll have times where your renewable energy is higher than your consumption, and then you might have to shed some of that capacity, right? You have to have equipment that controls that can actually deal with that, with actually shedding some part of the renewable energy or storing it. But that's a very different area, and having batteries at minus 40 degrees might not be the best part. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is very generic, and I'll go really fast with it, is that these are basically just the steps going from after a feasibility plan of which things you should cover, right? Like between going from the feasibility to the planning to the construction. Evidently, this is the same as any other project. Like, you put a wind turbine, fine, but you just change it for a water treatment plant, and evidently you have to go through the same steps and the risks that is associated with that, right? And then, so conclusions, it's that for these renewable energy projects to work, and actually that's one of the really nice things that I've seen today. It's awesome that all these presentations have add up, right? Like from the funding perspective, from the planning perspective, from the research perspective, it has add up to say that basically if we don't work with all those agencies and then we communicate and have all the available information and we're not all on the same page, these projects, even smaller ones, which is really good, right? And I think it's in the right direction. But if it doesn't continue this way, it's very difficult for these projects to come. Either way, right now they're coming from planning to deployment, as Mitch's saying, it takes probably 2-3 years, right? Which is fine as long as it goes in the right direction and the right information is there. And just basically, this is part of a project that it's in collaboration with all those people and those institutions that you saw on the third slide. And the next slide is just our contact information. And if you have any questions or something, probably during the session after this will be good to discuss. Thanks.
Bonjour. I'm from Batchewana First Nation. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I grew up in my community in Rankin. I left after high school for college and university. I have college education in fine arts, and then I went into Native Studies at Trent University. Graduated with my BA in Native Studies with a minor in Organizational Behavior and Native Management and Economic Development. From there, I went to work for the Royal Bank. I worked there for 10 years, specializing in Aboriginal banking. And then from there, I went for about 4 or 5 years with BDO Dunwoody, doing accounting and assuring. And then I started to work for my First Nation in the housing department. I was the housing director in my community for 2 years. We have about 500 on-reserve homes portfolio that we manage. And then from there, last July, so I've been in my position about a year, a newly elected chief and council decided they wanted to create a renewable energy department. So they posted for a renewable energy director position, which I applied for. We have several projects on the go in our community, which I'll talk a little bit about today. But what I really wanted to focus on is not so much the technicality of the project and the size of it and how we tie into the grid and all those other kinds of technical things, but more from a community perspective, the impact that it's had in our community, on our council, on our community members, the planning, the ever looming money revenue that's going to be coming into the community. I mean, how are we going to spend it, and how are we, those kinds of things that have impacted the community, and the relationship development that we've had with our partners, with industry, with funding, those kinds of things. Because those are a lot of the things that I find I've been to, since I've started my position, about 3 or 4 of these conferences, and the big focus is on how big is your project? Who's funding it? who's your partner? But there isn't really a lot of talk about, well, what actual impact has that had on your community from your community's perspective, from your First Nation? How do you deal with having these people in your community? How do you deal with the legalities of these kinds of projects, which is a very big challenge, I would say, in our communities. It's the other side of the coin, I like to think of it as. So just some general information about Batchewana First Nation for those of you that don't know. We're in the Sault Ste. Marie area. There's some tidbits about our community. We have 4 different actual on-reserve sites that are separate from each other. Rankin is located right next to Sault Ste. Marie. That's the bulk of our community. That's where our band office is, our arena, daycare center, health center, elders complex, industrial park. The main bulk of our community is located in Rankin next to Sault Ste. Marie. About 45 minutes north of there is Goulet Bay. That was sort of the original site of our community. We purchased Rankin in around 64, 65, something like that. There's probably another number on a slide, so I'm not saying it accurately, but it's around that time frame. We have a community center out in Goulet. We have sort of a small dock or harbor for our fishermen there as well. Our cemeteries are out there. There's an old church that was there that my grandparents got married in that was recently closed down. About another half an hour, 45 minutes north of that is another one of our communities that's actual Batchewana Bay. That's where our name comes from. There's about maybe 20 to 25 people that live out there. We just built a community center out there as well. We're trying to utilize it sort of as business development or having some conferences. Our project partners meet out there quite often. It's kind of like the middle point between Bow Lake, which is our largest wind farm, and Rankin Reserve. So they meet and do their project site meetings and things like that there. And then the other one is Whitefish Island. So if anybody's familiar with Sault Ste. Marie, we call them the Twin Saults. There's Sault Canada and Sault Michigan, and there's the international bridge that goes between them. In between those are the Canadian locks and the American locks, and then in between that is a little island, and that's where our people used to go and do a lot of ceremony, fishing, traditional harvesting, that sort of thing. So that was reverted back to reserve status a while back as well. Nobody lives there. We're attempting to have some sort of tourist theme to it. We've built walkways and put some wigwams and stuff up there and lookout sites and things like that. Sorry, next slide. So as I said, a year ago in July of 2013, our newly elected council decided they would create this renewable energy position. So previous to that, our partners, funders, and whoever else was dealing with our community would deal with a different person within the band office. So if you were at the part of the project where you were dealing with environmental regulations, you would deal with our natural resources manager. If you were at the part where you were negotiating an MOU or starting to negotiate some of the documents, you would deal with our CEO. If you were talking about what kind of money was going to come in or the things that you were going to do with it, you would talk to our EDO. So there was always somebody different. So one project partner might have 3 or 4 different contacts within the band office, and they were finding it a little difficult to get traction and keep things moving because they were always dealing with somebody different when it came to the same project in the community. So when the newly elected chief and council came in, we had a huge turnover in our leadership, by the way. We'd had some people in our community that had been on council for 10, 15 years, and we now have 3 lawyers, an insurance guy, and 2 other people, and 1 retired guy and another younger person, and the same chief. So it was a big change in the mindset of leadership, which was great for these kinds of projects. So they wanted one point of contact, so it was easier for all people that are looking to deal with Batchewana First Nation and renewable energy. You have one point of contact, and then I field all of those and I'll say, okay, I'll get back to you tomorrow or next week or whatever the case may be, and then I go and talk to the other people in the departments and coordinate, pull them into calls, pull them into meetings, pull them into different things so that there's always just one point there. And the response that we've had from the people that we deal with is that they love that there's just one place that they can call, and then with in-house we take care of who are the right people to pull to the table. Because maybe you're meeting with the natural resources manager, and halfway through the conversation, oh, we should have had the band manager here. We should have had. So there's that sort of planning ahead and getting things organized when people come to the community. So currently, because the projects are still under construction, the budget for the Renewable Energy Department is funding based. However, By 2016, late 2016, early 2017, the department should be fully self-sustaining from the revenues that are going to be coming in from our projects. So it's a little tough going right now, and so I'll apologize ahead of time to my funding friends who are out in the audience, but it's not always the most fun working with your funders in terms of getting things flowing in an easy way. So the First Nation has had to sort of finance this on their own quite a bit. So Batchewan is lucky in that sense that we've been fairly well at managing our finances over the years. And so we have that capacity to be able to do that, but not a lot of communities do. So you either rely on the ever-used Casino Rama dollars or your Rama funds that come in that way, or you kind of bite the bullet and rob Peter to pay Paul, and I'm sure somebody in here shouldn't be hearing that. Or you rely on your project partner to do that as well, but that can also become very expensive, and we've kind of done a little bit of everything. It's because one project that we have is almost $300 million, so no First Nation has that kind of money lying around that they can do that. Next. Oh, wait, sorry, go back. So when I was hired, there was just myself, and I recently brought on 2 months ago an admin assistant, and we also have a financial controller, because now that things are starting, we're getting close to dollars starting to flow, and a lot of the monies from funding are coming in and out. It's just more work than, well, there was 4 or 5 people doing it before I was, and those people are still here, but now there's enough work for the 3 of us and also another person to do business development. So like you were saying, your staff handles the work that you have ongoing, and it's your job to go out and find the new. That's the vision for Renewable as well. Hire people in to manage what we've got going, and my job will be go out and find new opportunities and find those other things there. So just some basic information about our projects. One of them is the Bull Lake Wind Farm project. That one's about an hour and 15 minutes north of Sault Ste. Marie. So this is in our traditional territory. It's not on reserve. We have a 50-50 partnership with Blue Earth Renewables. That's our corporate partner. They're based out of Winnipeg. So we fly back and forth. They also have an office in Ontario and Southern Ontario. Their partners come and fly it from there. We're currently, I think our first turbine goes up next week, maybe next week or the week after. So we've been heavy into construction since March or April of this year. There's a lot of roads that need to be built. There were some that were there. We're upgrading some. We're building some new ones. If you could just flip to the slide ahead just quickly. That gives you an idea of the project site itself. There's 2 phases to that. So phase 1 is about 11 to 12 turbines. That should be finished, I think it was by March of this year. And then by the end of, March of 2015. And then by the end of 2015, early 2016, the entire project will be done. And we'll see revenues flowing about a quarter after that, just to go back again. So our other wind project, Gooley Wind Project, or Chiwikwadung, which is our name for the project, is right within Sault Ste. Marie. So the Prince Wind Farm, if anybody's familiar with that, was existing there. We're just a little bit a ways from them. It's another 11 turbines. And again, we're 5149 in partnership with them, and that's Capstone Power Corporation, and they're based out of Toronto. So I fly to Toronto probably 2 or 3 times a month to meet with project partners, lawyers, consultants, different people, just to they come up every once in a while. They dread coming up because they don't want to put on their Canada Goose jackets and big boots or whatever. And so I fly down there, even though it's only Sault Ste. Marie. So it's a smaller project. It'll be done about the same time as phase 1, as phase 1 of Bull Lake. So if you want to go 2 slides. So that doesn't translate very well here, but you can see Gooley Mission. So that when I talked about Gooley Mission or Gooley Bay, that's the other part of our reserve. So down further, where you can't even see it on the slide, and I gotta grab these things. I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a small red blob here, and that's where the Gooley Wind Farm is. Okay, next slide. So in addition to the wind, we're also doing a couple of solar projects. The first one, and that was just sort of to get dabbled in the solar industry itself, is with a project partner out of Markham. So it's not anywhere near our community. It's not anywhere close to our traditional territory. Well, we wanted to delve into a partnership in the solar industry, so this company approached us, and So you'd say, okay, so it's not near your community. It's not anywhere near that. So why are you partnering with somebody in Toronto? So let's all, just be honest. Of course, they were using us as a First Nation to try and get the adder and to make it more economical for them. But hey, we're getting something out of it too. There's a transfer of knowledge, there's a partnership there, and there's revenue coming from that. So we thought, okay, we'll jump in and we'll try that. So there's 2 rooftop projects that are going in Markham. That's under the FIT 3. Under the 3.1, we did 7 applications that were all in our community on our reserve. 2 of the applications were approved, so we have a ground mount going on in our industrial park. We have a large industrial park on our reserve, 1 of 3 in Ontario. And then the other 3.1 is going on our bingo hall. It's maybe a 3 or a 4-year-old building. And it's next to the arena, which is 25 and 35 years old. It's one of the buildings that draws the most power, especially when you run 4 bingos 7 days a week. There's a lot of power coming out of that building. So those are the 2 that we have actually going on in our community. Both of those should be built by March of next year. So the revenue streams from those are a lot smaller in comparison to the wind turbine projects that we're doing. However, there's a lot less maintenance on them. The cost to build them is a lot less, and the revenue stream is a little bit more steady in that sense. It's a little easier. So those would be the projects that would help fund. Maybe we would pick a certain program within the community that needs to have, one of your communities one of your program that's traditionally underfunded is always in deficit, like O&M maybe, or something like that. So you could filter, dollars in that way. We're still working on our investment strategy for our revenues. So when I first started, one of our project partners, the one for the wind farm in Gooley, was doing a presentation at Canwea in October of last year, and he asked me if I would present with him. And so the next couple of slides are ones that I took from that presentation. And I found it very interesting. Any Canwea fans in the room? I don't have very nice things to say about Canwea. So at the Canwea conference, it was very interesting how at the very beginning, there was a lot of lip service around First Nations, partnering with First Nations. We love First Nations. We want to do renewable energy in First Nation communities and all this. And then so I happened to stumble and sit beside somebody that was on the committee for Canwea, and I said, so how many Aboriginal speakers do you have? None. Well, actually, you have 1. We do? Yeah. I'm speaking with one of our project partners at one of your sessions. So I just thought it was so ironic, and and I gave him an earful, and his response was, "Well, you have your own conference." Yeah. That doesn't help you learn more about us if we speak to ourselves at our own conference. So it kind of missed the boat in that one. But the next couple of slides were ones that we used to talk to, and there were a lot of developers in the room. And any developers in the room? So there were a lot of developers in the room. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my audience. But you have to be really careful as a First Nation when you're looking for your project partner. Obviously, everybody wants to make money at the end of the project. That's a given. What's important is how you get there, and the partnership and the relationship that you have with that developer along the way. Because no 2 ways about it, somebody's making money. But at what cost are you going to make that profit is what we've learned in our community, right? So you really have to choose the partners that you have. And so it was interesting because our project partner did this slide, and these were some of the areas that he said, as a developer, this is what we look for when we go to work, when we go to sort of scout out communities or look at First Nations that we want to deal with. And as I'm looking through it, I'm like, well, you know what? That's exactly all of the things that we would be looking for in a partner, but we'd add a couple more of those things, I think, or look at them from a very different perspective. So obviously, geography, they're looking for the best place. Where does the wind blow? Where doesn't it blow? Is there a benefit? Can we sell this? Is there a win-win with our partner? Can the First Nation actually handle this kind of project from their perspective? And so a lot of times when you go to any kind of conference in economic development, housing, whatever it is, the biggest thing you hear is capacity. So those developers are looking for a First Nation with capacity. There aren't that many out there, especially when you want to walk into a First Nation that's never done renewable energy and you want to put a $300 million project in their territory. What First Nation is going to have that kind of capacity? So that's something that they're looking for. A vision. Does the First Nations vision match with the project? I don't think any developer understands First Nation long-term vision. I don't think they really get what it is that First Nations are looking for. So the long-term vision of the project is what? To generate revenue. So yeah, hey, we're all in for that. A history of the First Nation-led economic development. So again, you were talking about the collaboration, and I'm so on board with that when you're talking about more regional collaboration, because there's so much more we could do as communities banding together than on our own. And values. Do the two groups share similar values? So people can talk about respect, and people can talk about equality, and people can talk about sharing, and people can talk about all of those things. But when you start putting zeros behind them and how those actually happen, the rubber hits the road, let me tell you. There is a very different interpretation of how those things actually get implemented when you have to have that kind of relationship. So sorry, the next slide. So these were some of, when he did that slide, so then I did this slide. And I thought, okay, these are some of the things then, similar to what you're talking about from a First Nation perspective, that we're going to look for in a developer. Does this developer understand how we value, manage, and protect our territory for generations to come? I'm going to take a real big guess and say, no, they do not. And it doesn't matter how many times you explain it to them, 7 generations is a foreign concept. And when you try and translate 7 generations into legal documents, into partnerships, into acknowledgement of self-governance, it's a very difficult concept to translate. So it's something that you as a community are going to have to be very steadfast in and insist and insist and insist and insist that certain wording, certain benefits, certain things happen when you're dealing with your project partners or the developers. Will this developer ensure fair and comprehensive opportunities? As a First Nation, you really need to understand what that means to them. What does fair mean to them? So to give you an example, wages. Anybody ever hear the term fair market value? What is fair market value? It's very subjective. Fair market value, fair market value. Somebody define that for me. Nobody knows what fair market value is. Fair market value is what anybody in the area at that time is going to pay, right? So you have people going out and doing research, no offense, doing research on what is the average or what goes on out there. And I'm just throwing numbers out there just to prove my point. So fair market value for wages working on a construction site are determined to be between $15 and $25 an hour. So first of all, that's a huge range. And secondly, where did those numbers come from? So then you actually have a job site, and you have people on that site, and these guys are actually paying their workers between $20 and $35 an hour. So which is actually the fair market value? The one of all the research that was done before, or the one that's actually happening in that market at that time? So that's where you come with fair and comprehensive opportunities, because understandings of what fair market value are very different, again, when the rubber hits the road. So make sure you have detailed conversations with people around the interpretation of these things. Does the developer respect your ability to enforce your inherent self-governance? No. They will tell you that they do. But when it comes down to writing the legal documents that hold them to their obligations for the next 20 years, that will change. So you have to be very, very diligent about the lawyer that you choose, and make no mistake, you need a lawyer. You need a really good lawyer. You need a team of lawyers, actually, that are extremely experienced in corporate law and understand First Nation perspectives to help you put what your community talks about in legal terms that will hold others accountable to you for what you actually want to implement in your community. And a lot of times they get very nervous when you start talking about implementing your own traditional law or traditional values or respecting the traditional knowledge that you have in your area. So for example, when we went through the RIA process for our wind farm, there were some decommissioning and remediation plans that had to be put in place about returning the land to the way that it was before the developer came. And our Natural Resources Department went out on the land at the same time that our environmentalists went out on the land. And we had an entirely different report to give them, in addition to what they had. Oh, well, we touched on that plan. Yes, but you didn't touch on it in the way that we use it, or the way that we interpret it, or the way that we need it to be 20 years from now. So there's a very different perspective on environment that you have to hold people's feet to the fire to respect and to actually incorporate into those documents, again, that will hold them obligated to that at the end. Will the vision of the community be personified in the results of the project? Only you as a First Nation can define that. You know, how far are you willing to go? How big of a project do you want to do? Are you willing to accept some of the impacts that it'll have on your community? Only you can decide that. Is there a long-term transfer of knowledge and skill? Man, am I so tired of hearing everybody talks about transfer of knowledge and skill. But does it ever actually happen? That's something that you have to implement. So when my position came on, we negotiated a 3-year transfer of knowledge and skill from the consultant that's been working with us. So I work side by side with the consulting company that helped develop the relationship, that works with us with all of our funders, so that I learn every day, every email, every document, everything from these guys, so that 3 years from now, if they leave, most definitely I couldn't be an expert because these guys have been doing it for 15, 20 years, but I could hold my own for a little while until I could get some more information. I could do a half-decent job to keep us going, to make sure that we weren't getting taken advantage of, or that certain things would be flagged. I know what to look for. I know what to, what the flags are. I know how to sort of maneuver through the system. So you definitely have to have that plan in place. Will this developer work to change current business models to incorporate traditional values? I don't know that either. You'll have to have that very, 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 very frank conversation with them. They don't understand traditional values. They just don't get it. Unless they've been working with other First Nation communities, unless another First Nation has taught them how to do that. And so again, you have to be very diligent on that. For both of our wind farm project partners, we held cultural workshops for them. So the main decision makers and the main managers for the EPC contract, for the guys on the ground working with our people, had to attend a 2-day workshop to learn about our community. They had to know who we were, where we came from, what our values are. And they also got some general information about First Nation people just as a whole. And wow, did the jaws drop when they heard that we can't use our houses as collateral when we go to get financing. Wow, did they not understand when most of us pay taxes? Just the myths and misconceptions that they bring to the table, and these are the people that you're negotiating 20-year relationships with. You've got to make sure they understand who you are as a community and who you are as a people if you're going to get value out of that relationship, if you're going to get to a point where where it truly will be mutually beneficial. So again, just sort of broad overview of some of the issues and challenges. So they've identified these as something that they were coming up against: long-term relationship building, corporate ownership changes, negotiating. So they're used to dealing with municipalities, they're used to dealing with individuals, they're not used to dealing with a government. Because essentially that's what we are. We are a level of government, and they're not used to dealing with that as a partner. So those concepts are hard for them to grasp. And then from the First Nation side, these were some of the challenges, still ongoing challenges in working with these. And then in the middle is just sort of maybe some suggestions or recommendations on how you deal with each of those on either side. So environmental concerns is huge, translating culture and tradition into business concepts. And that goes both ways, right? So it is difficult to transfer what we learn from birth as First Nation people to our project partners. But at the same time, for those of us that work in a business capacity, sometimes it's hard to translate those corporate things to your chief and council and to your community. It goes both ways. It is a challenge from both perspectives to be able to bridge that gap so that everybody understands. And so what did we learn? Well, and what are we still learning? We do have a consultant company that works with us, and they have 3 individuals within their company. One is a CA, so he's the finance guy that helps us with all the dollars. There's another guy that's an employment sort of ex-government person that helps us on that front. And then there's another guy that's sort of a jack of all. He knows anybody and everybody and their brothers. And when we need to have a meeting with somebody, he's right there and he's able to get us in. So it's kind of like a good sort of mix there. It's good to find a partner like that, and you're going to be dealing with these people for years from the time you actually apply to the time you actually flip the switch to get revenue in your community is literally years. We're in probably year 6, year 5, or year 6. So you better like your partner, and you better like your consultant, and you better like your lawyers, because you're going to see them lots and work with them all of the time, and hopefully you can build that relationship where you know each other very well. So these are just some of the things from either side, from a partner perspective and from a First Nation perspective, the things that we've learned. This one is important, creation of chief and council communication protocols. So there are certain, those of you that work in a band office know, there's a certain way that information gets to council. You go through your manager, you write a report, you attend a chief and council meeting, it goes through the band manager, however the case may be. For my position, as was recommended to me by our consultant, and I took them up on that, and I presented this to council and they approved it, I am the only staff member that reports directly to council. I have a direct line to council at any time. I have a working meeting with them every 2 weeks. I attend council meetings when they ask, and I have an email sort of protocol that if I need something tomorrow, I can email them, and as long as they all give me, as long as I get a quorum of response, then I document all of that and I take it to the next meeting and I get the motion passed. But because sometimes there are decisions that will come up, my lawyer will call and he'll say, oh my God, that meeting we had last week, you forgot to sign the resolution that allows the consent for this and that, and they go and talk all in their legalese, and if you don't sign that by tomorrow, it's going to cost you $10 million. Okay, I'll call you back. I send out my motion, I send out my email, I get it all in the okay, go ahead, we'll get it signed next week. That literally has to happen like that. I can't say, well, the next council meeting's in 2 weeks. I hope we get quorum. Everybody knows how that works. So it could be, 3, 4 council meetings by the time I actually get this. Meanwhile, it cost us $10 million 2 weeks ago and the interest is mounting. So there's a specific sort of protocol that I have that's kind of special, which, let me tell you, caused a little problems with other staff members. How come she's always getting everything signed and I've been waiting for 4 months to get... Anyway, so we had a strategic planning meeting last week, and I invited all of those staff members that were having some issues with that, and I said, okay guys, this is why I have this is why we're doing that. And so the waters are nice and calm for now, right, until the next sort of issue comes up. But we kind of smooth things over, and they understand sort of the magnitude of renewable energy is different. It's different in the sense that it will literally cost you millions of dollars sometimes if you don't make a decision right away. So that's sort of there. And so the internal, when I say this, so that was the impact. So a lot of other staff members don't understand what's going on in renewable. All they know is we have projects that are going to make millions of dollars, and now we got this person coming in. There's consultants coming in our community all the time. Why do they keep asking us the same questions? How come we got to keep filling out these surveys? How come we have to keep telling them what we want to do? Consultation, right? So there's lots of impacts on your community that you as the director or in that area have to sort of bridge that between to keep that communication open so that the community knows what's happening. And so because we're in the middle of construction in our projects, money is going out the door like there's no tomorrow. And I have to keep saying, okay, hang on guys, 6 more months, 8 more months, just hang on, it's going to come, we're going to flip the switch, it's going to happen. Meanwhile, I'm going, oh my God, we're getting close to our line. What am I going to do? We have to pay somebody else. I'm freaking out. And so we have our consultants that are helping with us manage all of those things and do all of those things. And he said the same thing. The last community that we worked with, we were with them for 7 years. And in the middle, when we were in construction, everybody was ready to throw in the towel because you're maxed out, everybody's stressed, things are getting signed left, right, and center. And then as soon as it's done and you flip the switch, everything just kind of goes calm. You know when you're in a boat and the waters are just going like this and then you turn the engine off and everything just goes. That's what it's like when you flip the switch. I am so waiting for that day when we flip the switch so that things just kind of go calm. So we're just trying to keep everybody, you got to have somebody there with that cohesiveness that kind of knows a little bit about everything and can talk to the other people internally so that in your community, you know the process, you know what's going on. You can talk about the different issues. You can talk about how it's impacting your council, the decision-making, committees that have to be made, the processes. The administration is horrendous. So there's all of those different things. Next. Oh, there we go. Does anybody have any questions? No? Sure.
I had one comment there. You were saying businesses or corporations, they don't really understand the cultural aspects and everything. And, we've encountered that up in our area. We invite industry, mining, forestry, whatever, to come and speak to us. We expect presidents or like the president or something. And then usually they just send the media relations person or the director of personnel or something like that.
Right.
So they don't really send the big.
That's right.
So it's kind of frustrating that aspect.
That'll be your first indication. Who do they send from their corporation to your community? You know, everybody wants to meet with the chief. Everybody wants a meeting with the chief and council. But when it's time for them to go and sit in our community, when we request them to come to negotiate, they send someone that's not of decision-making power, which in my mind is disrespectful. And so you have to, when you're talking to developers, say, okay, we want to have this meeting and we want someone who can actually make a commitment at that meeting of some sort that can be held to the entire organization when they leave. That's really all you can do.
That's no problem. And also, how big is your council?
We have 8.
8 councilors?
Yeah. 8 councilors and 1 chief. We had 1 councilor resign, so now it's 8 in total.
Position you said you held, was it this business development officer?
Renewable Energy Director, RED.
So you have PPMs as well as lawyers and consultants.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Special project manager.
Yes, I have that designation, yeah.
And you also sound like you're a Toastmaster.
No, I just love to talk. Actually, and I always tell sorry, I'm getting off topic. My daughter is extremely terrified of talking in public. Oh, Mom, I could never be like you. You can get up and talk in front of anybody. It's okay. Well, when I was in high school, if I had to do a project, like in any kind of project, I would get up in front of the class. And before I went to class, I'd be throwing up in the bathroom. And then when I actually got to class, you couldn't hear me talk over the paper shaking. So when I went to college, when I was in art, which was something that I was very confident in my ability to create art, the way we got graded was you had to stand up and talk about your artwork and explain why you put this color here. So after 3 years of doing that, I was like, I could tell anybody anything. I've done this, been doing this forever, so now it's easy. Any other questions? No?